Joining us now to analyze today's headlines is our news analyst, Courtney. She is an assistant professor of African American and Women's Studies at Penn State University. Hi, Courtney.
Good morning, Sonali.
In a major break from their usual methods, a group of Hong Kong protesters broke into a government building early this morning. They used concrete blocks and metal barricades to break open a glass door to the Hong Kong Legislative Council's office. Protest leaders denounced the action, saying it was inconsistent with their principles of, quote, non-violent resistance. The move is uncharacteristic in comparison to the unusually polite tone of mass protests that had racked the small nation in its bid for a more democratic autonomy from China. It comes after a large encampment called Occupy Central for Love and Peace was dismantled several weeks ago by police. Now, Courtney, whenever there are breakaway groups from large umbrella organizations that destroy property, there's a fear that provocateurs have infiltrated, but sometimes they might simply be people who are legitimately fed up with a slow pace of change. What do you think is happening, and has Hong Kong's very polite movement actually achieved anything?
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely a significant movement. I mean, it's a gathering that's really been brought together by diverse sectors of Hong Kong civil society, students, workers, all kinds of people there who have their own goals, their own values, their own sort of ideologies about what they want to see happen there in terms of the democratic process. And so it's not, when we have that many diverse actors coming together in a single political action, it's unreasonable perhaps to expect a kind of uniform response from all of these different people who are there for different reasons. But nevertheless, I mean, I think that the question of agent provocateurs being planted by the state in these spaces is one that's very important to consider, because it is a way, I think, of delegitimizing a movement that has enjoyed quite a lot of popular support among the broader society. So it's something that I think we need to take very seriously, at the same time that we also recognize that spaces that have the kind of Occupy spaces that are working right now often do operate in a really diffused manner. The leadership there tends to be a lot more decentralized. So it's not reasonable, I think, to expect a kind of uniformity of response under those circumstances.
Right. And here in the United States, Ferguson, Missouri's police department is under scrutiny once more, this time for the alleged rape of a pregnant woman by an officer while in custody. The woman, known by her initials JW, says she was harassed by a 29-year-old officer named Jairus Hayden and then raped before being set free. She has filed a lawsuit for damages related to her fear of police, anxiety over sex, and mental suffering. Meanwhile, a new study by USA Today examining the racial disparities in arrest records for thousands of police departments around the country confirmed that blacks are, of course, arrested at higher rates than other racial groups in Ferguson. The study also found, quote, nearly 1,600 places where the disparity in arrest rates is more pronounced than in Ferguson. In some areas, African Americans are arrested at a rate 10 times that of non-blacks. Now, Courtney, is the main lesson from these two stories that our methods of law enforcement embody both gender and racial oppression, and not just in Ferguson, but around the country?
Well, definitely. I think these reports and these incidents, these reports of sexual violence against women in police custody really speak to the larger culture of impunity that exists, that characterizes policing in this country. Too often, there are too many police officers who feel that they are above the law, that the law does not apply to them. And the failure, I think, of the federal government and local governments to really regulate police abuse feeds into that culture, right? It reinforces that sensibility. And it is a nationwide problem. I mean, right now there is a police officer, Daniel Holtzclaw, with the Oklahoma City Police Department, who's facing charges for sexually assaulting 13 African American women while on duty, women that he targeted because they were sex workers or came from low-income areas, and he perceived them as vulnerable and people that the state would not fight to protect. So in many ways, I think that this report and these cases, again, are speaking to this larger issue of we need to rein in the police. They're operating as though they are above scrutiny, and there needs to be a much more critical response than what we've seen thus far.
And finally, Courtney, extreme weather on the East Coast has resulted in at least 6 deaths. There were record-breaking snowfalls over much of the eastern half of the nation. In some areas, nearly 6 feet of snow fell in just a period of 3 days. In Buffalo, New York, more than 70 inches of snow fell in just 24 24 hours. USA Today reports that the storm could, quote, possibly set an all-time U.S. record for snowfall. 3 of the 6 who died had heart attacks while shoveling snow. 1 person died in his snow-covered cars. Crews and snowmobiles are attempting to rescue more people trapped in their cars under snow. And so far, about 100 people are trapped in their cars, some on the New York Thruway in Hamburg, New York, and they remain stranded. So, Courtney, the obvious question, the elephant in the snow-covered room, if you will, is should we be expecting more of this on a warming planet? And will climate deniers use the snow to make their case that we're not in trouble?
Well, I think obviously the climate deniers are going to try to use this as a way of arguing that there's nothing wrong with the climate. How can global warming be an issue if we're experiencing more snow? And, you know, the fact of the matter is that climate deniers seem to live in a world where there's no consequences. And even children know that all choices have consequences. We are essentially 2 degrees Celsius away from all hell breaking loose with the environment. And we are already experiencing, what we're experiencing now is just a taste of what we have to come on a planet where life is just going to become more difficult. It's going to affect crop production. It's going to affect quality of life. It's going to have serious impacts on the economy as we see the economy being disrupted by these more extreme weather patterns. So they can deny all they want to, but it doesn't change the facts. The science is pretty solid on this.
Courtney Morris, always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye, Sonali.
Courtney Morris is our daily Newsflash guest expert on Wednesdays. She is an assistant professor of African American and Women's Studies at Penn State University. This is Uprising. We'll be right back.